My friends and I went urban exploring in an abandoned hospital. We made a disturbing discovery. I stared up at the entrance to the old hospital, drinking in its features. Cracks spiderwebbed along the bricks and vines had claimed most of the exterior. It was an oddity against the encroaching forest, a relic of a time long since past. It felt wrong for it to be there, out of place, which only worked to pique my interest even further. "Well, are we gonna stand here all day or are we checking this sucker out?" Kyle asked, lightly slapping me on the back. "Let's go." "Don't want to lose too much daylight," Maddie interjected, tugging my arm. "As you wish." "Ladies first," I replied, extending a hand to the door. Maddie rewarded me with a glare. The interior of the hospital was in an even worse state than the outside. Lights had been smashed out, graffiti coated the walls, and pink insulation hung from the ceiling above. As an avid Urbex enthusiast, I was reveling in it. Something about being in a place that humans didn't belong always sent a rush of exhilaration surging through my veins. I lived for the thrill. But after what happened that day, my passion for urban exploring has been snuffed out. We were taking photos of abandoned medical equipment when Kyle brought it up. "Hey guys," he spoke in a whisper, despite the fact that we were alone. "Yeah," I replied, sensing the tremor in his voice. "Does it feel like we're being followed?" "I don't know. It might just be me. But something tells me that we're not the only ones here." "Stop. You're trying to prank me, and it's not going to work this time." "How gullible do you think I am?" Maddie retorted, crossing her arms. "Maddie, I promise I'm not joking." Her expression faltered when she realized the severity of Kyle's tone. "You're really not? Jake, is he being serious?" I sighed. When Maddie got freaked out, it wasn't a good time for anyone. Things had been going smoothly up until that point, and I didn't want to ruin a good thing. "Tell you what, Kyle, if we check out a couple more rooms and your sixth sense is still going haywire, we can leave. Sound good?" Despite their nods of approval, I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The tension was thicker, solid, as if I could reach out and touch it. Knowing what I know now, I wish we would have left the moment Kyle said something. We continued our search with no further protest from either party. We photographed our findings in silence, that pervasive unease still omnipresent. I kept trying to find something to say, but I couldn't arrange the words properly in my head. After a while, it was Maddie who broke the silence. "So who's down to find the morgue?" she said as a devilish grin inched across her lips. Kyle and I shot each other a glance. Neither of us wanted to go, but we didn't really have a choice. If we refused, Maddie would call us cowards until the day we died. "Sure, let's do it," Kyle said. He tried to sound confident, but he and I both knew the truth. "All right, but after that, we're leaving." My friends each nodded, and with that, we set off to find the hospital's morgue. It only took us about 10 minutes. As we walked, I tried to discern if I could feel the eyes watching our every move like Kyle had described. At one point, I thought I did feel it, an intense, overwhelming sensation that we weren't alone. I found myself throwing glances behind us every so often, but I didn't voice my concerns, a decision that I regret to this day. Before I knew it, I found myself descending the stairs to the basement. Our flashlight beams danced along the staircase as we went, shedding light into the inky depths below. Once we reached the bottom, there was a long hallway with a set of double doors at the end. "Spooky, isn't it?" Maddie whispered as we continued. "Yeah, feels ominous," I said as a shiver rippled through me. The air was colder down there, lending to the creepy ambiance. We paused once we reached the doors. "Okay, who wants to go first?" Maddie asked, surveying our expressions. "I think you should." "You suggested it," Kyle retorted, wearing a shit-eating grin. "Yep, as I said before, ladies first." I joined in, earning me another glare. "Fine. But if I die, I'm going to come back just to take you with me." Maddie pushed open the doors and led the charge, Kyle and I following behind her. Standing in that room sent a chill down my spine. Kyle turned to me, that taunting smirk returning to his lips, and he whispered into my ear. "Let's prank Maddie. You distract her, Meanwhile, I'll climb into one of the freezer racks and make a bunch of noise in there. I bet she'll scream loud enough to wake the dead." I smiled at him. Maddie was never going to forgive us for this. "One problem," I muttered. "How are you going to close yourself in?" "I'll figure it out." "Just..." "Nice try, dickheads. I can hear you." Maddie glowered at us like we were the spawns of Satan. My face flushed with color and sweat beaded atop my brow. "Yeah, we weren't actually going to go through with it. Just an idea," Kyle said, rubbing the back of his neck. She wasn't buying it. Bang! A sudden rattling sound erupted from one of the mortuary chambers that Kyle had centered his plot around. It started off quiet, small enough to be dismissed as nothing more than the groan of old metal, but it soon escalated to a loud clanging. We stared at each other, wide-eyed, our faces pale as ghosts. The sound had grown into a deafening pounding. Something was being slammed hard against the inside of the door. It was clear that Kyle's earlier premonition had been spot on. We were not alone in that hospital. We stood, frozen in shock, left to helplessly watch as the door buckled under the weight of the blows, over and over and over again. Bang. 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 To my utter horror, the door gave way. For a moment, it was silent, the dented metal creaking, barely clinging to its hinges. Then, something began crawling out of the unit, something sinister. A pair of feet emerged from the darkness. The skin was a dark purple, and stitching around the ankles was barely holding together. A dirty, blood-stained hospital gown followed, then a twin set of patchwork arms. Finally, the thing's head shot out of the dark as it hoisted itself off of the freezer rack. That face will haunt me for the rest of my life. Stitches pieced its mottled skin together, roughly hewn flesh sallow and wrong. Its smile was crooked, too many teeth fighting for space in that twisted grin, and its eyes, they were completely black, devoid of life, devoid of a soul. Kyle suddenly grabbed my arm hard. He ran without a word, Maddie in tow. That gave me the resolve I needed to follow them. The three of us bolted down the hallway, desperate to get away from whatever we had awoken. My heart jackhammered in my chest as I realized that we were being chased. The sound of bare feet slapping against the tile fueled my legs to work harder than they ever had before. Once we reached the stairs, I bounded up them 3 at a time, bolting for the exit the second I reached the top. The thing had been gaining on us in the basement, but once we reached the main landing, I couldn't hear those wet, awkward clops pursuing us any longer. Even so, I didn't let that stop me. I kept running, never once looking back, until I burst out the front doors, unlocked my car, and threw myself into the driver's seat. Only then did I allow myself to catch my breath. A second later, Kyle threw open the passenger side door, dove in, and slammed down the lock. He turned to me, his face pale and soaked in sweat. Still trying to catch his breath, he managed to croak out the words that still haunt me to this day. "Jake? Where's Maddie?" My heart plummeted into my chest. She wasn't there. Should we go back?" I asked, a cold dread blanketing me at the thought. The two of us sat there, staring out the windshield, praying that somehow our friend would explode out of those doors and join us. But that didn't happen. We sat there for longer than I'd like to admit, completely silent, desperately grasping for a solution. Eventually, we called the cops. The police searched the entire hospital and combed the surrounding woods, but they didn't find any trace of Maddie or the man who had chased us. Aside from the texts agreeing to meet that day, there was no evidence that Maddie had even been there in the first place. It was as if she simply poofed out of existence. But Kyle and I knew what really happened. We had abandoned her down there with that monstrosity. We'd put our own safety over hers. We were the reason that she was missing, and we had to live with that. Kyle and I drifted apart in the weeks that followed. Maddie still hadn't been found, and I think the weight of what we'd been through was too heavy for us to come to terms with. When I'd look at Kyle, the crushing reminder of what we'd done, or more aptly, what we'd failed to do, would come flooding back. It eventually reached the point where we would only sporadically check in on one another. That is, until he sent me a strange text one afternoon. "Hey man, I need to talk to you. Not over the phone, but face to face. Meet me by the pond in the park at 8 tonight. The message caught me off guard. Whatever it was that Kyle needed to tell me, it sounded urgent. As I would come to find out, it was. I found Kyle sitting on a park bench by the pond. It wasn't completely dark yet, but the sun was dipping below the horizon. As I claimed my spot beside him, I noted that he was staring off into the distance. His hair was disheveled, and it appeared as if he hadn't slept in days. "Kyle, are you okay? You look like you've been through the ringer." He turned to me, his bloodshot eyes connecting with mine. "Jake, I'm not okay. I don't think I'll ever be okay again, man. I can't take it." He was getting choked up, and tears began to well in the corners of his eyes. "No, you can't think like that. Everything's going to be all right. If this is about Maddie, she'll—" Kyle turned to me, the stone-cold look in his gaze deterring me from finishing my sentence. "You haven't been seeing her, have you? So it's only me. Fuck. I'm screwed, man. It's over. She's going to come for me. Then she'll use me to get you, and—" I grabbed Kyle's shoulders and shook him. He was raving like a lunatic, an asylum patient off his meds. "Snap out of it. What are you rambling about? Seeing Maddie? What does that mean?" Kyle looked at me with a cold stare. His wild hair fluttered in the wind as an ominous breeze swept through. "This is going to sound insane, but Maddie has been visiting me. Or what's left of her. Her mouth is stitched shut, her hair is soaked in blood, and now she's wearing one of those hospital gowns. It got her. She's not alive anymore, Jake. That thing from the hospital, it's using her to get me, and once it does, you'll be next." I couldn't formulate a response. I stared at him, mouth agape, turning over his words in my mind. Could what he had just told me even be possible? "That's it. That's all I needed to tell you. Well, and I guess I wanted to say goodbye. I doubt I'll make it much longer. Jake, I'm so scared." Tears openly streamed down his face, and my first instinct was to pull him into a hug. He sobbed while I tried to console him, failing to subdue the tremors that racked his frame. "Look, it's going to work out. Trust me, you are not going to die. I'll think of a way out of this." We both knew that my words were hollow, yet it felt better than saying nothing at all. Kyle pulled away and wiped his eyes, that foreign look from when I'd first seen him returning to his face. "Jake, I really hope you're right, for both of our sakes." I called Kyle's mom that night and voiced my concerns. Her son was spiraling, and whether it was due to some entity gunning for his soul or some kind of vivid hallucination, I was determined to get him some help. But my efforts were all in vain. Kyle's body was found 2 days later. He'd eaten a slug from a 12 gauge. The neighbors claimed that they heard screaming, hysterical wails like Kyle was trying to get away from someone or something. And then they reported hearing multiple gunshots, followed by an unnerving silence. No one saw anyone enter or exit the home, leaving all of the witnesses perplexed. The news painted him like a man with a rampant mental condition, a loon who let his untreated delusions frighten him into making the worst decision possible. But I know that what Kyle saw was real, because lately, I've been seeing her too. She appeared for the first time the night that Kyle died, standing below a street lamp across from my window. His description of her had been deadly accurate. Maddie's eyes were stitched shut, and her arms hung limply by her sides. Her hair glistened with something dark, and the hospital gown she wore had yellow stains blotched across the front. But her smile, there was something sinister behind it, something evil pulling the strings, and I'm afraid that I'm going to find out what that thing is firsthand. 3 days have passed since then. I've started seeing Kyle too. The two of them have been moving progressively closer with each passing day. Last night they were in my room. They just stared at me, smirking, taunting me. Maddie with her unseeing eyes and grin with too many teeth. Kyle with what was left of his reconstructed face, flesh and bone melded together to form something vaguely human. Now I realize that they came to deliver a message. My doomsday clock is ticking down, and I only have a few hours left. because when I awoke this morning, splattered across my bedroom wall in a deep crimson were the words, "Tonight, your soul belongs to me." The dangers of urbexing. My friend and I love urbexing. Since we were 4, we would go and explore abandoned buildings. Whenever we went on trips, we would relish the opportunity to go into abandoned buildings. We never thought of it as dangerous. The possibility of death never crossed our minds. Until that day, October 15th, 2017, we were both 16 years old. We decided to explore an abandoned gas station. For the preservation of privacy, I'm going to give my friend a code name, Dante. Dante. Okay, I'm not scared, but this place is creepy as fuck. Me. No cap. Dante. You sure you want to do this place? Me. We've pretty much explored everything else in this town. Dante. Yeah, but there's always that trip to Boston. Me. I ain't backing down because of fear. That's not how my last name ancestors did it, and that's not how I'm going to do it. Dante. Yeah, well, my ancestors are from Italy, so me. Lessa go Mario. Dante. Haha. I'd bet. A cheery start to a haunting discovery. We entered the gas station. The floor was made out of fake wood, and it was covered in a thick layer of dust, so when we stepped it made shoe-shaped prints in the dust revealing the faux mahogany underneath. The place was left the same as it was when it was abandoned. The freezers were empty, but the racks were covered in expired candy, bags of chips, and other things you would expect to find at a 50s convenience station. Dante picked up an old pack of Big League Chew and showed it to me. Dante, dare you to try it. Me. Hell no. I ain't dying in some old dusty gas station from getting E. coli from expired gum. We moved to the front counter. We opened up the register, hoping whoever abandoned the place left the money there. Sadly, no such luck. Dante looked at the magazine rack. He picked up a Playboy magazine with a picture of Marilyn Monroe on the cover. He whistled at the picture and showed it to me. Me. Find me one with Audrey Hepburn, then we'll talk. Dante. Dude, there is no way Audrey Hepburn is hotter than Marilyn Monroe. Me. I'm into redheads. We kept looking around the place. A few minutes pass and we don't find much more interesting, until... Dante. Hey TJ, I found something over here. He calls me TJ, at a shorter version of my real name, TJ. Me. What is it? Dante. It's some kind of hole in the wall. Me. That should be interesting. Dante. Just to be safe, did you bring the masks? Me. Yep, they're in the backpack. We got 2 medical masks out of my backpack. We didn't want asbestos poisoning. We put on the masks and went through the hole. On the other side was a medium-sized room, covered wall to wall with photos and newspaper clippings dating back to 1979. We started exploring the room looking at the newspaper clippings. All of them seemed to be about a serial killer. Dante. TJ. Me. Yeah? Dante. You might want to take a look at this. Me. What is it? I walked over to where Dante was. What I saw will still haunt me. My heart sank. My pulse raced. I looked up at a corkboard, covered in photos of me, each one dated, the earliest being October 12th, 2001, my birthday. What scared me the most recent photo, is of Dante and I entering the gas station. Me. We need to leave. Dante. Agreed. Dante and I turned toward the hole we came from. When we crossed to the main room of the gas station, there was an old man standing there, holding a bloody axe. He had a big gray beard, a flannel shirt, and a beer-stained Led Zeppelin shirt. Old man. I've been waiting for you. For 16 years. Me. Dante. Dante. What? Me. Run. Dante. I won't leave you. Me. I'll be fine. Just go. Dante. I'll come back, and I'll bring the cops. Me. Hurry. The old man. Didn't stop him. I'm unsure as to why. I pulled my knife out and took a defensive stance. My grandpa taught me how to defend myself effectively with a knife. He swung the axe down. Instinctively, I rolled away, but the axe nicked my shoulder. I made the decision to run, so I did. I ran toward the highway, thinking if I could get there, he wouldn't follow. I was wrong. He didn't care. He followed me. Then the really terrifying part of this, he started singing. He started singing the song, My Only Sunshine, the song my mom used to sing when I was scared. How did he know? How long did he watch me? My wound was bleeding, I was running out of adrenaline, my body felt weak, and I was running out of breath, until, while not paying attention, I tripped over a rock. I fell onto my face. Immediately, I turned around to face my assailant. Old man, now it's time for what I've been waiting for. He raised the axe high over his head. I braced, accepting my death, but before he could strike, a loud crack came from behind me. I looked. Dante had signaled a police officer and led him to me. The officer shot the old man dead. Officer, are you all right, son? Me. Yeah. Officer, if it wasn't for your friend here, I wouldn't have found you. Dante rushed over to me. He helped me up. The officer bandaged my wound and sat with us until ambulance arrived. After that, we decided we would take a break from urbexing. That experience haunts me to this day, but today me and Dante are meeting up in Houston to try some more urbexing. Wish us luck. Urbex story, that evil house. Ever since I became an adult, I've long been a fan of Urbex, urban exploration. It has always been fun for me to explore abandoned businesses, factories, power plants, and even some houses. My most terrifying experience was 3 years ago, when my friend and I were in a small town in eastern Virginia and asking around about any abandoned places. We sadly didn't find anyone willing to talk about any, but we eventually came across an abandoned, large adobe-style house. We cased the place, and as usual, we made plans to find a way in at dawn. As usual, we carried 3 light sources, masks to protect against asbestos, water, snacks, 2 pairs of gloves, 2 cell phones, and I carried, even though my friend didn't like it, my .380 ACP pistol. I carry even if it carries risks of higher charges, due to wild animals often being present, and also to ensure that if I walk into a drug den or something, I have a way to defend myself. I do have a carry permit and training, so there's that. This house was huge, about 3 levels, and surrounded by dense forest. We arrived about 4:30 a.m., a little before dawn, and we began looking for ways in, i.e., broken windows, unlocked doors, etc. We didn't find anything on the ground level in the dark, so we waited for more light, and eventually we found a loose window we could force open. We climbed inside, and it appeared we had entered a large sunroom. The place was dingy and abandoned. Dirt covered the floor and tiles were cracked. I activated my lantern, and we put on our masks and tried the door. It unlocked, and we entered a large dining room. I tried the light switch. Dead. No power, as is usual with abandoned houses. A large table was in the middle of the room, covered in dust. Broken chairs with rotten wood were strewn across the room, in a violent manner, with visible dents in the drywall from where chairs were lobbed with considerable force. My friend motioned with his lamp, and we entered the kitchen. It was small, but there was still very old canned food and bags of chips in the cupboards. Roaches infested the place. We moved quickly through and eventually found the hallway to the first-floor bedrooms. I tried the first door. Locked. I pulled out my toolkit and used a screwdriver. It's that pop-open design if you stick a pointy object into it. Enter a teen's room out of the late 1980s. A very high-end tape deck was on top of a dresser, along with 2 speakers, Metallica and Megadeth posters, and a lot of other stuff. Seemed pretty well intact, as if the family abruptly left or disappeared. Strange, I thought at the time. Next room. Much of the same, except a much younger girl's room. Bathrooms were located, and predictably, gross and filthy. We ignored them. At the end of the hall was a T-intersection. One stairway going up and the other going down. I turned to my friend, and he motioned we should go up first. I ascended the stairs slowly, carefully putting my weight on each step to check for rotten steps, and liberally using the handrails. Ascending to the next floor, we were confronted with a wide corridor, with a bedroom door open at the end of it. I motioned to my friend and whispered, "I'll check it out at the end of the hall. You check the other rooms." Carefully, as I felt uneasy, I brushed the gun in my torso holster to ensure it was there still. I carefully glanced inside, checking the closets first, the master bedroom. Sheets carefully folded on the bed for God knows how long, dust covering the floor, and a sliding glass door out to the balcony. I looked outside. The sun had not yet risen, but the birds were beginning to tweet and wake up, so I knew dawn was coming soon. I slid the door open carefully. Its track was rough and difficult to force open. The balcony was sparse, and as there was no water around, it just faced the stands of pine trees outside. I carefully closed and locked the door. I then checked the bathroom. Much cleaner, but had roaches. Gross. I called out to my friend, "Yo, anything cool?" My friend responded, "No, not really. Just more bedrooms. This place is an 80s time capsule though." "Okay man, come in here and let's regroup." I stood, waiting for him to finish snapping the photos he wanted. As he came in, I continued, "You want to explore the basement?" "Why not?" "This place is deserted," he said enthusiastically. I felt uneasy for some reason. I breathed deeply. I don't know, I don't have a good feeling. Something isn't right. "Oh, don't be such a pussy. Come on, let's go. Breakfast will be on me," my friend said, barreling down the stairs. I followed him, more carefully and slowly. The basement was finished, and much larger in size. We looked around and counted 3 doors and 1 closet. I tried the first door, it was locked. I tried the second, it opened into a storage room, nothing special. I tried the third, locked. The closet door was also locked. I turned to my friend. "I think we should call it a day. I'm not getting busted for opening locks." "Bullshit. Get out your tools and try the door locks." Reluctantly, I caved to peer pressure and opened my kit. At the third door, I poked my screwdriver in. It didn't pop open. I felt around to see if it was a skeleton key door. It wasn't. Shrugging, I put it away. I tried the closet. It was a push-button lock like the ground floor bedroom. I swung the door open slowly. A shrine to something came into view. A large octagonal metal table inscribed with writing that looked like Hebrew was there. Burned-out candles, and what looked like a bloody handprint. My friend was always a weirdo, and he was like, "Cool," and proceeded to take photos. As he did so, I felt that feeling that we were being watched stronger. "Dude, I'm getting out of here," I said, literally shaking. "Oh, come on, it's just some toy or something. Let's do the first door," I protested. "No, man, I'm leaving." I ran up the stairs as fast as I could manage. Looking out towards the end of the hallway, I thought I could see a child standing there, but I didn't. I got feelings like we let something out that we shouldn't have. I drew my pistol, feeling extremely unnerved, and made a run for the sunroom. I started opening the windows, the crank on the window moving as fast as I could, and I had slipped my way out halfway when my friend grabbed my arm. "Where the fuck are you going?" he exclaimed, visibly angry. "Getting out of here now." "I don't care, dude. This place is evil. Let go." He pulled on me harder, trying to yank me back in. Still holding my pistol with my other hand, I said, "Dude, if you do not let me go right now, I swear I will fucking shoot you." He let go in surprise, and I fell to the ground. I put my gun away and turned to him, climbing out. "What's your problem?" "I've never seen you like this," he insisted, as he forced the window shut. "I don't care. Let's get out of here now. I'm hungry." As I drove back into town and we ate at a nearby Denny's, we barely said a word to each other. The fear had barely left me. As the waitress came to check on us, she remarked to me, "What's wrong? You look as white as a ghost." Near about to cry, I turned to her and said calmly, "We had a shocking experience in an abandoned house, so we're both a bit unnerved." The waitress's expression changed. "Oh no. You didn't go into that abandoned house on that side of town? The one that's been abandoned since the 80s? I didn't answer and looked down at my plate. "Mind getting me some more bacon and a refill?" I held up my cup. "Sure thing. Feel better," she said. Sometime later, we finished up our things and I drove my friend home. As he got out, a slow smile crossed his face and he turned to me. "See you next time." I forced a smile and said, "Take care, man." Peace, as I drove off. Many weeks later, I'm back to work and trying to forget the creepiness of that place when my friend calls me in a panic. "Dude, you gotta come over here, please." I was taken aback, but drove the 35 minutes to his place immediately. He was sitting on his porch, Urbex gear packed. He looked ragged, like he hadn't slept in weeks. As I approach and ask him what's up, he doesn't answer, just stands up and puts the bag in my car and then says, "Take me back." "What the hell are you on?" "Take you where?" I exclaimed in his face. The house." He trails off as he says this. My heart sank. "I don't have my gear, but why do you need to go back?" The voices won't stop. He then produces a half-burned candle. You fucking didn't steal that, did you? From that crazy altar thing?" I begin hysterically. "It was a trophy," he responded. "For those out of the loop, Urbex, you're supposed to be an explorer, not a thief. Some Urbexer people sometimes take trophies, but this is frowned upon heavily, as it turns trespassing into theft, breaking and entering, burglary, etc. You fucking idiot. You're lucky I don't throttle you." I began shaking him. "Don't let me ever fucking catch you stealing again." I shove him into my car, run back to my house and grab my gear, and then wordlessly I drove us back to the house. "You're gonna go in and return it and take nothing else," I said angrily. I still brought my gun and was already afraid. It was already midday when we arrived, but eager to get it over with, we go to the sunroom. I try the windows, but stop. The one we had used is now smashed with spiderweb of cracks. I try another, and it opens fine. I boost my friend into it, and then Cat climb the wall inside. Before going further, I hesitate and look at the glass. It was not hit from the outside. It's bowed outward slightly. I'm visibly unsettled. I lead the way into the hallway, but as I enter it, I almost hear evil laughter, like a malicious child. My blood could have chilled just then. I turn back and see my friend is also unsettled and panicking. "Dude, you fucking take it! Did you hear that laughter? I don't want to go down there!" He begins pleading with me. "Nope, you stole it. You return it right back where you found it. Regardless of how evil this house seems," I responded angrily. We descend the stairs, but as I do, my lantern sparks and goes out. I curse under my breath and retrieve my shaker light. I shake it for 40 seconds and it illuminates the room okay. I also check my other flashlight. It's fine. I beckon my friend, who is still at the foot of the stairs. He comes, shaking visibly. As I approach the closet, I swing it open and gesture for him to put it back. He approaches, almost slowly, and produces the candle. He puts it down where it was, in the candle holder. I feel my palms sweat, and suddenly I hear a crying child, whimpering behind the third door. My instincts take over, and I back away from the door slowly and begin trembling. I draw my .380 and turn to him. "You done? Let's fucking go." He turns and says, "Yeah, but that sounds like it's coming from behind that door. It sounds like a kid. We should help." He proceeds to try to wrench the door open but fails. Stupidly, I pull out my set of tools and I try again. There's no pop button, no skeleton key notch. I grab my crowbar and I jam it into the door while my friend holds his lantern. I start wrenching hard and the door begins to crack, but the crying is replaced with deep, evil laughter, and the entire house seemed to shake. I drop my crowbar to the floor, terrified. I stoop to pick it up and shout, "I'm getting out of here," and I run for the stairs. As I turn back for my friend, he's rushing too, but I almost see a face materializing near the closet, that of a little girl smiling maliciously. I scream at the top of my lungs and I run up the stairs. I see the girl at the end of the hall and stupidly begin firing my gun, emptying the entire magazine before I know it. The girl disappears as soon as I begin firing, and I don't even hear the report. My friend is hysterical, crying and screaming. We run for the sunroom, and outside, somehow, it's suddenly dark. I take my crowbar to the broken window and smash it and then haul ass out of it, my friend barely following behind me. We run for my car and I floor it out of there. I look at the clock, 8 p.m. I turn to my friend. How did 20 minutes turn into 8 fucking hours? I don't know, man, just drive and get us as far away as possible. I oblige and drive us into town. We stop in a parking lot and just begin to cry. We are bawling, 2 grown men in our 20s, just straight up crying. I drove him home soon after. I just went home and kept all the lights on and curled up on my couch, trying to forget. 2 years later, my friend shoots himself quite suddenly. In his suicide note, he simply has, "That girl haunts me over and over. I'm sorry, everyone, but she won't leave me alone." Nobody knew what he was talking about and assumed he had schizophrenia or something. Only I know the truth. I was never haunted by the girl. I've never obtained trophies from my explorations. But regardless, I don't Urbex houses anymore. Too much spiritual baggage and too much demonic shit I've seen from that one time. I will never forget my friend, but I still keep tabs on that address every so often. It has since been torn down and redeveloped. I don't dare come near it though. That place is evil. Urbex story: I discovered an old property, and I don't know what I believe anymore. 2 years ago, when I was 26, me and my friends loved to go just outside our town and explore seemingly abandoned places. Sometimes we'd go on road trips and find cities that were ripe for that kind of stuff. Now, of course, whenever I went anywhere, I was never alone, and I never brought anything sketchy on me in case I had to talk with police. We never tried to hide when a car came up, and even though we had some close calls, we clearly meant no harm and were let go on the few occasions it did happen. Overall, I'd say we had been doing Urbex for around 3 years. It's honestly one of the things I would have normally looked forward to the most. But now, I can't even think about it without one particular incident coming up. One of my friends who had been with us all those years had passed away unexpectedly, and even now I was never sure how it happened. The people I thought I knew so well going through all these adventures grew cold with me over time, almost as if they partially blamed me for it. This happened just a month before I turned 26, and just like that I spent my birthday alone. Even though I was still trying to recover from the loss of not just him, but everyone else who turned their backs on me, I decided to keep doing Urbex, but this time on my lonesome. I think deep down, trying to redefine it without them was my way of coping, but I had no idea just what would come from that would lead to me experiencing something so horrid. I don't remember exactly when this was. I believe it was sometime in November before Thanksgiving, as just after Halloween I was hiking out into the local forest off the established trails to see if I could find anything interesting. The town I lived in was hilly and nestled deep enough in the wilderness that you couldn't see streetlights once you walked some feet away from the center. It held a lot of history and secrets with it, and that alone was a massive reason why it was a great place to search for weird spots. I had already seen people in the thick of the night doing weird stuff when I was younger, and sometimes when I'd see them wander, it would scare me enough to block my window entirely. Even though I never saw anything remotely disturbing in all my time there, I still got the shudders from time to time until that very night. When I first set out, it was still the afternoon, and it was quite sunny for the time being, though in the beginning of the month I was going off the forest trails specifically to find places. On this day I was mostly just trying to chill out and do some basic hiking. I kept to the trails though. I managed to walk much farther than I normally would, and in a few hours, the sun was already about to set. Normally I'd scuffle back to the town before it got that dark, but I was still bearing with heavy emotions, and sure enough I found myself walking off the trail somewhere deep within. By the time I realized just how far I was, I could barely discern the difference among all the trees around me, which loomed high enough to form a partial canopy against the sky. I pulled my phone out to look at GPS, but I had really bad signal out at the time. Just when it didn't seem bad enough, I witnessed some storm clouds peek by, and in just a few minutes I was pelted with rain. I could feel my calm demeanor turn bitter and agitated as the night rolled in, and I was stranded entirely. In a way, I just wanted to fall asleep right there. I wanted to be taken away by the elements and never have to deal with the emptiness inside of me again. One part of me still remained frightened that if I didn't act immediately, I would die out in the forest. So even though I stopped for a minute, I attempted to gain back direction in any way possible. I tried to remember which way the sun was facing and where it set. I thought if I could figure out which direction was west, I could turn eastward and move back toward the town. Unfortunately, due to not really paying attention to begin with, and the night having fully descended, it was impossible. Even worse, the air sapped against my skin and was quite cold, and the rain only made the sensations even worse. My hands started to numb, and I was ill-equipped to deal with such weather. I had only intended to be out during the day and go back home, but at that point, home was completely gone in every sense of the word. No one was there to help me. The cold was invading my body and numbing my mind as I sluggishly tried to move through the thicket and find something to protect me. I started to cry, scream, and yell continuously, only to hear nothing but the pelting of the rain. It was an absolute nightmare, and I struggled for what seemed like over an hour just trying to escape the clutches of the woods. Though I thought it was a miracle at the time, I unfortunately noticed a silhouette among the trees walking along a hill. I had finally found someone to help me. I called and yelled out to them for assistance, but once I did, they seemed to turn and look in my direction, before quickly running off out of view. It was too dark to make out any features beside the shape of the body, which was tall and skinny. Like an idiot, I pursued the figure marching up the hill to follow them, and believe me when I say it took just about all my strength to climb up there with my numb hands, stiff legs, and weakened mind. Once I got up there, I felt an immense unease upon seeing a massive Victorian-style home standing just below me. It was unlike anything I had seen in my entire life spent with Urbex, and though it was quite beautiful and ornate, with various lights affixed along its sprawling porch in the front, it felt far too out of place. The figure had vanished, and I didn't see anyone walking near or around the place, and yet it seemed to have electricity. There were no cars parked, but there was a pathway leading up to yard that seemed to stretch back out once I began walking up to it after carefully sliding down without hurting myself. There was no fence, but there was a gate further out along the pathway, and once I was directly standing in front of the house, I could hear the roar of a generator somewhere just out of sight. I was completely in shock at what I was seeing and conflicted on entering, as in some respects it didn't appear abandoned at all yet. It also looked like no one was there at the same time. I figured if anyone was there or about to be there, I could explain what happened, and they'd helped me find my way back home. Never in my life had I visited such a property, and especially not alone and in such horrible conditions. I was hanging on by a thread, and so I felt I had no choice but to walk up to the door. Even though it did seem to be inhabited, there was still a musty smell of decay as I walked onto the porch as the old warped wood creaked. I knocked on the door and called out. No response. I did so again after several minutes. Nothing. Then I decided to try for the door, but it was locked. I felt my blood curdle when I heard a woman laughing on the other side. It didn't feel like it was directed at me, rather more like to someone else who was inside with them. Even still, the laughter erupted over and over, and I couldn't help but feel myself shudder away instinctively. I noticed there was a second porch just above the one I was on that also had a door. I attempted to climb up against the pressure of the rain still reeling from the shock of the abrupt laughter. I managed to get myself up there and tried for the door, which swung open without much effort. In contrast to the rough yet ornate exterior of the building, the interior was in excellent shape, warm from the fireplace situated right across from a lavish bed. I quickly sat myself in front of the fireplace and absorbed the heat while attempting to at least partially dry my clothing. I felt a sweet relief at least for a few minutes. The same laughter from before reverberated under me, though it sounded much like a different person. I could feel the vibrations of people moving around just outside the room, which forced me to stand up. I grew tense in an instant, gently moving toward the door and pressing an ear up to it. The ticking of a clock filled the space behind, along with feet quickly making way past the door. Voices rang out, but they were too muffled and frantic to make out. For a while, I was petrified to even open the door a bit and peek. I mustered enough nerve to finally make the move, but as soon as I did, a piercing cry rang out just below the stairwell. Then a violent dragging sound rippled across the wooden floors as the screaming continued. I had to clutch at my chest just to calm myself as I peered down. The voice had been silenced, and yet no one was downstairs. The space was only filled with the ticking of the clock. I could not believe the rapid change and shift that had occurred so suddenly. It was as if my mind was trying to play tricks with me. I finally stepped out fully and descended down the stairwell overlooking a grand foyer. I could see the front doors, the hardwood floor, decadent chandelier, and vast assortment of paintings. I thought then I had stumbled into some restored rich family's mansion, only to remind myself that this house was seemingly out in the thick of nature with no close proximity to the town. Nothing was making sense. And yet I couldn't stomach just what was happening with the lack of any people but seeming auditory presence of them. I could feel my mind rock back and forth as I carefully walked about the space and searched through the other rooms on the second floor. They were quite nice, from the bathrooms and bedrooms, all topped with a distinct office space. Practically every space seemed lived in, and yet I still couldn't find any people. I was constantly on edge as I explored, knowing anyone could be around the corner. The office especially creeped me out with the large bear rug just before the desk, books and documents strewn about everywhere. On the desk, a taxidermied raven stared at me with malice as I searched through everything. An old brown stain lay just next to a dossier reeking of a foul odor as I attempted to comb through the files, all of which had weird documentations on random locations throughout the world. I couldn't make sense of it, as all the documents just detailed the location in question or were damaged beyond repair. Then a dreadful presence appeared behind me. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them standing there. I stood paralyzed for what seemed like forever before it got even worse. A cold hand grasped my shoulder, accompanied by the voice of my dead friend. I turned to face him, only to jump back into the desk and shriek. That's when his low-pitched laugh invaded my ears as I was forced to get a good look at him. He was wearing a partially tattered suit, his eyes full, skin pale, and a fresh crimson was strewn across his face. He didn't appear decayed at all, yet he didn't remotely appear normal either. I would have sworn it was a different person entirely if I didn't hear the voice first. He walked steadily over to where I landed as I attempted to get away from him. He giggled, then began talking once more. "Hello there, Simon. It's been a while, bud. How are you doing?" I continued to stare and shudder as he looked over me, his teeth yellowed and stained with some sort of black substance. He continued, "I'm sorry to say this, but I can't have you be here. The missus wouldn't like it, not one bit. I will leave, okay? I won't have it. Not in the house and not in the streets. That is, unless you want your birthday present." The more he spoke, the more twisted his expression became, like a wolf staring down at a wounded lamb. Nothing he said made any sense, and I felt he was poised to strike at any time, yet he was so casual as he spoke. I gave him a reply. "What? I thought you died. What do you mean? What birthday present? What happened to you? It's a surprise, of course. You'll have to follow me to the basement if you want to see it. We're playing some games down there. Come on, you'll love it. I don't know if you've seen, but I've been so busy lately. But hey, life isn't all about work. Let's celebrate." He pulled out a dagger from underneath his suit jacket and held it over me. In a soft voice, he began muttering the happy birthday song to me. I could feel my entire body shake, my legs twitching as he followed me around the room muttering. I took the first opening I could get. I ran out of the room and soon after felt his feet facing behind me. In a surge of terror, I raced for the front door, but it was barred from the outside, and I had no time to unlock it as he chased me around with the knife, laughing like an ecstatic boy. Then I heard a commotion come up from below as a couple of others stormed through a door. For a moment, glancing at them, I could tell they were my other friends, the same ones who never told me what happened. I could feel my sense of reality warp and shift as I ran in panic, still being chased. I clambered back to the bedroom I came in through and leapt off the balcony, injuring my ankles. I screamed out as the rain pelted me again, and in a flash the three were on my tail, shouting and screaming at me in a frenzy. Then I hurried my way to the pathway toward the gate, suffering through the pain of the injured ankles. Worse still, the gate was quite tall with spiked tops, but that did not deter me. I climbed it and threw myself over on the other side, slicing into my chest. I continued down the path and into the darkness, not stopping for a single moment as the voices continued to ring out in the distance. I just kept running for what seemed like forever until I could no longer hear them, and I ducked behind a tree, shivering from the cold and fresh fear. I still hadn't eaten or drank anything in hours since that afternoon, and so I found myself hiding out in the night, clinging to life dearly, even as I felt my ankles ache and my chest bleed. I shivered and shook for hours more until I passed out entirely. I woke up to find the bright sun shining down on me, my entire body in extreme pain. I was still near the road, and despite how dazed and deprived I was, I kept going further and further out, until the path came to a halt, with large rocks blocking what seemed to be a separate gate. I walked around it, and within another hour, I finally saw the town again. I felt my body collapse again as soon as I got into a store and explained what had happened to the owner, who quickly gave me food and supplies after seeing how horrid my condition was. He called emergency services, and I was taken care of at the local hospital, where after a week or so, I had fully recovered from the injuries. Even now, after all of that, I am terrified. I ended up moving across the country to get away from not just that, but from my whole past, with the people I called my friends. I'm in a much bigger city with no forest to speak of, and that alone has helped me calm down after permanently having large masses of trees trigger my memories back to that. I've been getting odd phone calls and voice messages from numbers I don't recognize, but that honestly might just be a coincidence, and this post is just me trying to get this off my shoulders. Honestly, sometimes I'm not sure if what I saw was real, but that is more than likely just my mind trying to protect me so I can move on. I never want to go out on my own out in the wilderness again. Sometimes I can barely leave my house, as this has had me develop a sense of agoraphobia since then. I'm working through it the best I can, and though thinking about it makes my skin crawl, I hope that people are at least more aware of the dangers of going out like this entail. It's also incredibly difficult for me to trust people anymore after this, and I hope I recover from that too, but that seems years in the making. I feel like the adventurer in me died that night. If there's any message to this I could impart to you, it's to be very careful in this world. You never truly know what's going on, and sometimes the people you love and think you know are something else entirely. Urbex story. My friends and I explored an abandoned school. I wish we hadn't. I got into Urbex at an early age, middle school to be exact. This was long before it became popular on YouTube or TikTok. I was never outgoing, academically advanced, or particularly good at sports. Neither me nor any of my friends had much extra money to throw towards spending afternoons at the mall or arcade. My first experience with Urbex started when some friends and I had a sleepover at Caitlin's. Caitlin lived in a trailer in a rural village. A lot of the houses nearby were large and expensive, not quite mansions, but pretty close. We were eating popcorn and watching a movie when Caitlin mentioned an abandoned home behind her house. She explained that the couple who lived there had a nasty divorce and the house was up for sale as a result. Caitlin had never seen the inside of the house, but her mom had mentioned it being really nice. I had an idea to liven up our night. "Why don't we go see it?" I asked. They all looked at me like I was crazy. "We've snuck out before. Why not just go over, take a look, then come right back?" Caitlin shrugged. "I don't see why not," she said. Caitlin distracted the family dog with a treat while the rest of us crept out the back door. It took less than 5 minutes to reach the house. We tried unsuccessfully to pick the lock, but luckily Jessie found an unlocked window. The interior of the house was magnificent. The floors were all marble, and there was an extravagant fireplace in the living room. We began to look around. Each room seemed more luxurious than the last. One of the more notable spaces was a hot tub, oddly placed at the landing of the stairs in the front room. After an hour or so of exploring, we headed back to Caitlin's. Luckily, we got back in without waking her parents. Since that night, Urbex has been my passion. Caitlin and I explored many abandoned places together. Our selection of locations to explore expanded over the years as our curfew got later and we got our licenses. Although Caitlin was adventurous, there was still one destination she avoided. Oak River School was one of the most insidious yet least known scandals in my hometown. It seemed to be a typical high school. It boasted average academic scores and a great football team, but below the surface, something wasn't right. A record number of graduates from Oak River were diagnosed with cancer, particularly leukemia. Some were diagnosed only a few years after graduation, and others not until decades later. The school was abruptly closed, and students were sent to temporary sites to continue classes while a new school was quickly rebuilt several miles away from the old one. Eventually, the truth came out. The soil Oak River High was built on was used as a dumping ground for nuclear waste in the 1940s. The cancer rates weren't a coincidence. The old Oak River was never torn down. My aunt, Cora, was one of the many unfortunate alumni who developed leukemia. She passed away when I was 17. She was the stereotypical cool aunt who let me watch R-rated movies and served me Pepsi in a wine glass whenever I visited. More than that, Cora was the only one in my family I could truly be myself around. From holding me as I cried when I wrecked my bike at 6 years old to helping me through my first breakup at 15, I could always count on her. Losing Cora was the worst experience of my life. I'd always wanted to explore Oak River, but for some reason her death made me fixate on it even more. I had to see what it looked like, the radioactive school frozen in time. I felt like if I walked through the same hallways or stepped into the classroom where Cora had been so many years before, she would be there with me. Of course, I was smart enough to realize this was just a morbid fascination from grief and that nothing would change once I left, but I still couldn't let go of the thought of going to Oak River. "Come on, Jess agreed to go and she's bringing all her photography equipment," I begged Caitlin during our phone call. "No," she responded. "You know that's the one place I won't go." I accepted her answer and called Jess to let her know we would be going without Caitlin. We met at the back entrance of Oak River at 8 that night. The school wasn't as hard to break into as I expected, and we quickly found ourselves in the hallway. Some old trophies and medals were still on display behind the dusty glass. Why didn't they take those? I wondered out loud. They're probably all covered in radioactive dust. Jess laughed. Ron, Jess's boyfriend, met us shortly after we found our way in. He's into paranormal investigation and wanted to try out some of his equipment as the school was rumored to be haunted. They proceeded to the gym and were messing with the EMF sensor for a while, so I decided to look around on my own. The first few classrooms I looked at weren't as bare as I expected. They still had posters on the wall and other equipment out. I found a globe and spun it, instantly regretting my decision as dust flew into the air. Luckily, we had worn masks and gloves to try to limit our exposure as much as possible. I heard a rustling noise. I turned around to see where it was coming from. Next to the boarded-up window, I noticed a mostly wilted, potted plant, but the plant wasn't dead. It was moving. Very subtle movements. I had to do a double take to be sure of what I saw. "What the hell?" I whispered. The only way I can describe the movement is almost a sort of twitching. I got out my phone to record and picked up a ruler to poke it. The plant coiled around the ruler tightly, almost yanking out of my hand. I yelled and jumped back. Jess and Ron came running. I tried to explain what happened, but they didn't seem convinced. Ron found a pointer by the chalkboard and poked the plant again. It didn't move. I stammered, trying to explain what happened. Jess and Ron exchanged glances. "Maybe you shouldn't be walking around here alone," suggested Jess. Ron nodded. "Let's all just stay together," he suggested. I reluctantly agreed. We took a look in a few other classrooms. Jess photographed each as we went along. Eventually, we made our way into the cafeteria. We found some old trays, glasses, and even unopened cans of food. As we ventured further into the kitchen, Ron halted, almost causing Jess to run into him. "Why'd you do that?" she snapped. "Shh, listen," whispered Ron. Through the silence, I could hear a faint chewing noise. It continued for a few minutes, then came the clang of a can hitting the ground. A light rustling followed. We stood there frozen. Ron involuntarily coughed. A figure emerged from the darkness. Jess turned the flashlight to it. It definitely wasn't an animal, but it also couldn't be human. It stood on two legs, was almost 7 feet tall, emaciated with yellow-tinged skin, speckled with red boils that looked like they were about to pop. The figure let out a groan that sounded equal parts terrified and angry. Jess screamed, dropping her flashlight. Ron and Jess took off in one direction, while I ran in another. I ducked into a janitor's closet. I tried to quiet my breathing as much as possible, even taking off my mask, trying to catch my breath. I sat against the wall, head in my hands, trying to stave off a panic attack. I looked around the closet a bit, seeing if there was anything I could use for self-defense. All I found was an old broom. I stayed quiet for a while, then hesitantly stepped out of the closet. When I was convinced the creature was nowhere close, I began looking for Jess and Ron. I tried calling Jess, but my phone had no service. I heard labored breathing and trudging down the hallway. Damn it, I thought. I noticed a door on my left. It was glass, but was fogged up to the point where I couldn't see through it. The hallway was a dead end, and I could hear the figure getting closer. I opened the glass door and stepped into the room. The air was thick and humid. I struggled to keep from coughing. I put the broom through the door handles to barricade myself in. I hoped the figure would pass me by, but then I heard a pounding at the door. I wasn't sure how much force it would take to break the old glass, and I had no interest in finding out. I panned the room with my flashlight, looking for another way out. My flashlight passed over a dark, reflective abyss. This was the old pool. The walls were covered in a mixture of black and green molds. I remembered Cora had mentioned being on the swim team years before. There was a door on the other side of the room. I began making my way to the other side, but quickly realized my way was blocked by some overturned bleachers. I tried lifting them up, but it was no use. "Harper!" Jessie yelled from the door on the other side of the room. Noticing the predicament I was in, Jessie and Ron attempted to move the bleachers but weren't able to either. At this point, the glass door was splintering from the humanoid monster pounding on it. "You know how to swim, right?" asked Ron. I nodded. "Are you crazy?" screamed Jessie. "She can't swim through that radioactive bullshit." I'd already accepted my fate of having to wade through this disgusting abandoned pool and tried to reassure her I'd be fine. I found a piece of wood to set my backpack on, trying to keep it as dry as possible. I stepped into the cold, dark water. The water felt thicker than I expected. It was like moving through jello. The smell was a repulsive combination of decay and metallic. I swam as fast as possible. I'd almost reached the edge when the water began rippling. My right leg stopped moving. It was caught on something. Jessie and Ron noticed my struggle. Ron jumped into the water and tried to pull me forward. He shined a flashlight through the dark waters, revealing a labyrinth of dark green limbs. "What the hell?" Ron whispered. The water began to move rapidly. I felt the slimy substance tighten around my leg and screamed. Ron began thrashing around, cursing and yelling. I frantically grabbed for my backpack, retrieving my pocket knife out of the front pocket. I took a deep breath, went underwater and hacked at the slimy substance trapping my leg. It began to twitch as the grip loosened and I got myself free. Jessie was pulling Ron out of the water on the other side, crying frantically. Something most people don't know about Jessie was that she had an extreme fear of water and couldn't swim. A near-drowning experience when she was 4 had left her traumatized. I pulled myself up to the surface and we all ran out the door. Ron was limping. He had a nasty gash on his left calf. Once we got some distance from the pool, we stopped, and Jessie tied her jacket around it to slow the bleeding. Jessie's phone rang, startling us. "Caitlin," she answered. placing it on speaker. A grainy FaceTime call lit up the screen. The background was dark but looked familiar. Caitlin was in the classroom closest to the entrance. "Caitlin, listen to me. You need to leave. There's some weird shit happening here," Jesse tried to explain. The connection wasn't good. The call cut out every few seconds, making it difficult to understand. Jesse, Ron, and I all tried to explain what was going on, but Caitlin clearly didn't understand. The connection continued to get worse the further into the school Caitlin got. Eventually, the call dropped completely, and none of us were able to dial back out. "Jesse, you and Ron get out and go find some help. I'll find Caitlin and meet you guys on the other side." Ron tried to protest. Luckily, Jesse was able to convince him that the bleeding was too serious to continue. As we parted ways, Jesse and I agreed that if Caitlin and I weren't safely out in 15 minutes, she would call for help. "Caitlin!" I called out as I reached the front of the building. "Help!" I heard her yell frantically. I ran towards the sound and saw her. We sprinted towards each other, but she tripped over something in the process. A figure donning an archaic gas mask emerged behind her, grabbing her ankles and dragging her away. "No!" I yelled. I tried to run towards the assailant, but someone grabbed me from behind. As I tried to fight my way out, I flailed, slamming my head into the wall. I felt dizzy, and everything went dark. I saw a light. I knew what people always said about going into the light. Was this death? "She's awake," I heard. A paramedic was kneeling over me. I jumped. As I regained consciousness, I started stammering. "What's going on? Where's Caitlin?" The EMT tried to calm me. My mom and Jesse were nearby. My head hurt a lot and my arms and legs were bruised. I was transported to the hospital. That night, the only answer I could get, as far as Caitlin's whereabouts, was that they were looking for her. The next day, I was informed by police that Caitlin's body was found in the school. The stairs had collapsed, crushing her. I tried to tell police about the man in the gas mask, but they clearly didn't believe me. They pretty much nodded, then had a social worker follow up with me with information on trauma counseling. What bothers me the most is I'm not even sure Jess and Ron believe me. Something sinister is still happening in that school. I'm going back. River Oak won't take anyone else from me. Urbex story. The man living inside the abandoned elementary school took my best friend. I met my best friend Jacob in the 6th grade when we were both 12. I was at a new school and didn't know anyone. As an awkward, nerdy, acne-ridden kid, it was no surprise that I spent months on my own. My mom, worried about the early death of my social life, made me go to my school's middle school dance. As expected, I sat there alone most of the night, sipping Kool-Aid and eating out of what had to be the world's smallest bag of chips. That's when I met him. He sat next to me awkwardly and spoke muffled, almost to himself. He pointed to my t-shirt featuring a faded drawing of Sans and said he also liked Undertale. Not long after, we became inseparable. We would do everything together. My mom was so glad I had a friend. She let Jacob come over pretty much every weekend. It helped that she got along well with Jacob's mom. They'd often catch up for hours after Jacob got dropped off. Life was good, and for the last time in my life, I was truly happy. One day after school, we found ourselves watching scary urban exploration videos on my dad's old computer. We noticed that one of the places in the video was a local abandoned elementary school. Now I know how infamous it was, but all we learned from that YouTube scholar at the time was that it was shut down after some kids went missing when the school was still open. It was then that we naively decided to seek it out and explore it for ourselves. We figured that maybe we could find something that nobody else had. It was a pipe dream that seemed plausible to our underdeveloped 12-year-old minds. We began to set up our master plan after we saw that video. We decided then and there that we would make it to that school, and we did. We told our parents we'd be going down to Main Street to get some food after school one day. We lived in a small town, so our town's main street was just a short walk away. After doing some research online, we found out that the abandoned elementary school was just past the woods behind the school which we currently attended. Jacob's mom was going to pick us up from the Pizza Hut in town at 7, and our school day ended at 3. That gave us about 4 hours to get in, see what we could find, and get out. Instead of our school books, pencils, and notebooks, we packed our back with flashlights, extra batteries, snacks, and bottles of water, most of which would remain unused. Our school was so small, we were able to sneak away without any fuss. We didn't have much staff, and most of them were busy dealing with the hordes of middle schoolers, so 2 quiet nerds like us could sneak under the radar. We made our way out through the car rider line and traced along the edge of the building out back towards the woods. The sun sat on top of the tree line like an ominous timer, reminding us to complete our mission before it disappeared beyond the horizon. We made our way through the woods, getting slightly cut up and itchy due to the underbrush. We made random howling noises to try and creep each other out, but just ended up laughing at one another. We remarked how we didn't see a single animal, not even a squirrel. We came across a few odd things as we hiked through the woods. The first was a campsite, which we left alone as our fear of messing with adults was greater than any other. The second was a rickety old deer stand. After daring Jacob to climb to the top multiple times, he caved and very cautiously climbed up the handmade ladder. He made it to the top and his fear changed to wonder. He said in awe that he could see the school from up there. Before he got down, he picked up a pair of binoculars off the floor of the deer stand. He pointed them towards the school and laughed, saying he could see everyone going to the buses and even into some of the classrooms. I told him to hurry up, and he took the binoculars and again, very captiously climbed his way back down. He pocketed his new binoculars, despite my hesitation, parading them around like he'd been a prospector who just found gold. Deciding I couldn't change his mind, we continued on our way. It didn't take long for us to reach the elementary school. Even in the daylight, we didn't notice the it until we came up face to face with its brick exterior. The overgrowth was climbing up its decaying walls, barely holding on to life. We made our way up to a window and peeked in. Books and desks were randomly scattered throughout the inside of the classroom. A shelf was lying on its face, covered in mold and sitting in a pool of water that probably hadn't seen the light of day in decades. We failed to open the window, so we made our way down the side of the building. Eventually, we found a door. It was propped open with a cinder block, and we quietly rejoiced at how lucky we were. We made our way in through the door and found ourselves inside what looked like the teacher's office. We giggled to ourselves. Even though the school was abandoned, we felt as if we were breaking the rules by being in that room. We agreed to look around the room, which was, for the most part, still intact. We found what we referred to as some boring old documents, and not much more. Jacob found a mug that said "World's Best Teacher" and pretended to sip out of it. He laughed and remarked how stupid it is for someone to forget a mug like that. We shared another laugh and agreed to explore elsewhere. We made our way down the empty halls, a feeling of unease crawling under my skin as we roamed the empty, silent hallways. The inside of the building was a stark contrast to the outside. It looked relatively untouched by the oppressive forest just beyond the school's walls. Suddenly, a loud crash came from one of the classrooms behind us. We screamed and turned around, seeing a door open and slowly hit the wall next to it. We slowly inched our way to the classroom, Jacob brandishing a book he picked up of the book, ready to throw it at anything that jumped out at us. Jacob rounded the corner and looked into the room, yelling something unintelligible as he reared the book back. He stopped and said nothing was there. I came around the corner behind him, and there indeed was nothing there. It was empty. The teacher's desk sat in the corner. The desks sat in various formations, and there were even some toys and various utensils scattered along the floor. There was a large metal filing cabinet that lay in the corner. We made our way over to it. As we did, we saw a small hole in the wall behind it. We threw away our fear and excitedly jogged our way over to it, hoping to find some hidden treasure. When we got close and peered in, we were disappointed. It was just a bunch of children's clothes. We brushed it off and made our way out the room, exploring a few rotting classrooms and supply closets as we made our way down the corridor. At the end of the hall, we came to the steel double doors that lead to the gym. We used our combined strength to push through the rust accumulating on its hinges. We looked around the gym in awe. Even though it was an elementary school, the gym was much bigger than ours. Though long abandoned, we could tell how nice and well kept it used to be. He dared me to race around the gym, and I agreed. After getting barely over halfway, I stopped, already out of breath. Jacob stopped soon after. We were definitely not the athletic type. We hazed each other for our lackluster performances before continuing our expedition. Once we got to the back of the gym, to what used to be the coach's office. The blinds in the window were still down, so we couldn't see inside. We tried the handle, and were surprised to find it unlocked. As we went into the office, we were shocked. It looked untouched, like, literally untouched. A mug sat on the desk which still had magazines on it, somewhat neatly stacked together. On closer inspection, the mug had some water in it. It was clean and clear. Jacob, who was exploring the other side of the office, called me over with a childish giddiness coating his voice. Making my way over to him, I saw what he found so funny. It was a sleeping bag, open and slightly ruffled. I still remember what he said. What kind of teacher sleeps in his own office? Our conversation was soon broken by a faint sound. It was out of place and made our hair stand on end. Footsteps, and they were approaching us. Just barely noticeable, as if someone was trying and failing to sneak up on us. We looked at each other, fear painted on both of our faces, and our minds rushed on what to do. Jacob took my arm and dragged me to the supply closet at the end of the room. He shut the door, trying not to make any noise. As the door came to a close, we became submerged in an inky darkness. I tore off my backpack and nervously searched around for my flashlight with shaking hands. Taking it out, I fumbled with the light, trying desperately to turn it on. I began to pace around, but as soon as I took a step back, I heard a loud popping crack coming from the ground beneath my feet. Then, silence. Loud, deafening silence. As I turned the flashlight on, I dragged it over to the location of the noise. A small leg bone sat beneath my foot, cracked and broken. I drug my gaze up and looked into the eyes of a small, decaying body. A child, not much younger than I was. Rotten, decayed skin hung from the bones, which were stained a dark reddish brown. Their clothes were caked in blood and other indescribable fluids. The head was caved in, mangled and torn skin grafted onto the sick, rotten bone. The light began shaking in my hands. The body, although unmoving, looked as if it wanted to scream for help. It didn't scream, but I did. A loud, broken yell escaped my mouth. I almost didn't know I was screaming until Jacob tried to get me to stop, shaking me as tears fell down his eyes. He was quietly yelling at me, which was muffled and far. He grabbed my arm and bolted for the doorway, halting my screams. That's when I caught on to the loud, bolting footsteps coming straight for the door of the room we were in. Without hesitation, Jacob pushed the door open with all the force his small frame could muster. As soon as he did, I saw him. A large man stumbled back, reaching for us. As we pushed past him, he shouted something at us. Not a word, but an inhuman grunt that was more reminiscent of a monster than any human creature. I did not look back, and sprinted along with Jacob as fast as our little legs could run. Beads of sweat ran down my face, melding with tears and viscous snot. But something was wrong. I didn't see Jacob beside me. I turned to see Jacob on the floor just a few yards behind me, lying on the floor, clutching his foot. I screamed at him to get up when I realized there was blood pooling around his foot. He had stepped on a rusty nail, which had burrowed its way deep into his foot, stretching the cloth on top of his shoe. He groaned and cried from the pain, trying to stop the bleeding in that fleeting moment. I tried to run to him, but fear anchored me to my spot on the floor. The man, or whatever it was running towards Jacob, and it didn't take him long to get to him. His large hand wrapped around Jacob's arm, ripping him off the floor. He screamed, kicking and flailing with all his might, but the man was like a wall of stone, cold and unmoving. I saw his face, warped terror and anguish mixed together, an expression that should have been alien to a child of his age. Then I bore witness to the thing that has haunted my dreams ever since that night. The face of the thing that took Jacob. Whatever it was, deep down, it was not human. There was no humanity behind its eyes. I left him there to die. I could not face that thing. I turned and ran out of the school, back through the halls, and out of the teacher's lounge. I didn't dare to look back, not even for a second. I hadn't realized how quickly it had become dark outside. I could barely see, my flashlight bobbing and shaking violently as I sprinted at full speed in one direction. As I ran through the woods, I tripped several times and bruised the hell out of myself. Every time I did so, I thought I'd look behind me and see it standing there. But I never did. As I ran out of the woods and towards the school, I was lucky enough to run into the school's bus driver, custodian, Mr. Henry, who immediately called the police upon seeing me in that state. He consoled me as best he could until the police arrived. When I told my account to the police and our mothers, I lied. I told them we got turned around while playing in the woods, and I lost track of Jacob as we were trying to find our way back. I was too terrified to even think of that place, of that thing, let alone mention it to other people. His mother, a single parent, never recovered. She took her life a year after he went missing. After losing her husband just a few years earlier, the loss of her child was the straw that broke the camel's back. I just wish I told her the truth before she passed. I never saw Jacob again. I'm only confessing this here and now because they found his body. I don't know how, but when I turned on my TV this morning, there he was, on the news broadcast. He was mangled, bloodied, and defiled. His head was caved in, beaten into a dark void of blood and bone. He was nothing but a shell of my best friend. I cried and cried and cried some more. Then terror struck as I came to the most horrible realization of my short life. He was 16 when they found him.